here's my closing question for you. This is to a doubter, somebody who says the word occupation. If I could show you a document that based on international law that proves that those who told you Jews stole land are either lying to you or misinformed, would you want to see it? How many of you would like to see that document? You're holding it right there. We're going to get into that in a few minutes. I too would like to thank Robert Walker. Absolutely honored. I'm the founder of Israel Truth Week. In 2012, after some Jews got intimidated at Western University and the campus police stood around and watched, I was outraged by it, and I said I got to do something. So I organized my first conference in 2012 in London. The next year we held a conference in Hamilton, and last year we were in Lozier Synagogue, and I think we had over 230 people there. It was awesome. But I never wanted to be in the conference business. I wanted to be in the brand business of creating, facilitating other people, so that when other people are doing their events, they would have a name that they could use to counter Israel Apartheid Week, so that they would come and list their events on my website. But I knew we had to create something to start with. Hence, we did 3 conferences. After last year's conference, Robert did such a great job. This year, he asked me, listen, could we list Israel Truth Week or list this event as an Israel Truth Week event, and would you speak? And I said, is a 5-pound canary fat? Of course. I'd be glad to. And that's why, and gradually there's more people coming on and listing their events as Israel Truth Week. And that allows me to focus on a really critical issue for me, and that is destroying the occupation narrative. So that's what we're going to talk about today in 2 sessions. The title of my talk is Israel's legal rights. But before I go there, I just wanted to say one quick thing. Very often, especially at my conferences, I'd have people coming up to me all day and they'd be saying, Mark, this is an awesome conference and somebody should be here, and why aren't they here? And they're all upset. And I say, you know what? Here's a good lesson for you. Never be angry at who's not in the room with you. Be grateful for who is. So would you please just turn to your neighbor on either side and introduce yourself. I hope you're making friends, because these events are important because you get to network with people and you understand what the other person's doing, and together we become stronger. We share narratives together like we're going to do today. Awesome. I'm glad to see it. I'm sorry, our PowerPoint, we're having some technical difficulties, so we're going to have to go with the booklet as our only prop. Sorry about that. The title of my talk is Israel's Legal Rights. I'm not an expert in Israel's legal rights, by the way. Everything I know about those rights comes from Salomon Ben Zimra and Goldie Steiner of Canadians for Israel's Legal Rights, CILR.org. I don't know if they're here. They should, right? And also Joe and Renata Goldhard-Kaminer, who are here. And I don't know where they are, but I've seen them. There they are in the front row. So I stand on their shoulders. And my goal is not to make you, so I'm no scholar on Israel's legal rights. Those are the scholars, especially Salomon, who wrote the book, The Jewish People's Rights to the Land of Israel. That's who I learned from. So my goal is not to make you a scholar, not to make you an expert. It's to help you build and control a new narrative based on those rights. A narrative to counteract the failure of, as I see it, Israel advocacy to address the core reason I believe it's losing the PR battle. Okay, so I'm not giving you, although we're going to talk about an important legal document and we're going to make arguments based on that document, I'm giving you a marketing case. I'm teaching you how to conduct counter-propaganda using this important legal document. So, Richard talked about dealing with audiences, and I think that's really important. Our goal is not to convert the crazies or the hardcore. Our goal is to reach the undecided and the people on the fringe. So when we're talking to this person online, we treat them with respect. I'm not trying to win her over. I'm trying to create a record online with a series of facts and fact-based references that the other people can use, and I'm going to teach you how to control that debate online and offline as well. Okay, you should all have in your booklet a handout with a quote by Menachem Begin, okay, called Lessons of the Holocaust. Looks like this. It's a loose sheet. Lessons of the Holocaust. Let's have a look at that one. If you look, there's some great advice in this document, but the one that I really, really like, that speaks to me today, is the fourth one. The seeds of Jewish destruction lie in passively enabling the enemy to humiliate us. During the Holocaust, it was after the enemy had humiliated the Jews, trampled them underfoot, divided them, deceived them, afflicted them, drove brother against brother. Only then could he lead them, almost without resistance, to the gates of Auschwitz. Therefore, at all times, and whatever the cost, safeguard the dignity and honor of the Jewish people. Vital, vital words to me. And how do you do that? So our goals today, part one, which is right now, is we're going to understand something called the Mandate for Palestine and how it can be used to create a strong narrative in defense of Jewish honor and dignity and turn the tide of public opinion, one person at a time or more. Tonight, what we're going to do in the second half, using the same booklet, we're going to learn how to control the narrative by overcoming objections and learn the importance of modifying our language to avoid using the language of our enemies. And we'll do some questions, okay? Now, I did a presentation for some potential investors, you know, in the last few months, I guess. And the people couldn't wait for me to finish so they could tell me how wrong I was. And he said, Mark, your ideas are radical. Radical! So I want you to pay attention today and decide if what I'm telling you is radical. It's radical because I was speaking truth. And truth can be very threatening to people. Oh, man. Oh, awesome. Okay. Flip a slide if you can. What do we get, a 12-year-old on the line? Thanks. No, I'm not ridiculing. I'm making fun of myself. We need a 10-year-old. There we go. There's Menachem. Menachem Begin. There we go. Thank you so much for that. Awesome. So my wife says, we need a 10-year-old to program the VCR or something like that. Okay. So your ideas are radical. And my ideas are, let's tell the truth. Because you can't have a solution until you know the truth, right? So let's talk about some truth. Next slide, please. The other side has a really interesting narrative. And the narrative, Jews stole our land, they're illegally occupying it, so we have the right to kill them in self-defense and end a brutal occupation, but when they kill us, they're committing war crimes. Does everybody agree with that? Is there anybody who doesn't agree with that? A couple of people don't agree with that narrative. Don't agree? You don't agree that the occupation is a part of the narrative or at all? No? Occupation's not a part of the narrative. Their narrative. Yeah, their narrative. Okay, well, all right. A couple of people disagree. Every time I watch CNN during the Gaza war, it always devolved to occupation. But we're firing in self-defense. Yeah, but you wouldn't have to if you didn't have an illegal occupation. So for me, occupation is the key narrative there. Now, let's, next slide. Now, what's our narrative or your narrative or Israel's narrative? Okay? Think about this scenario right now. So Yossi's living in Toronto, and his neighbor comes up to him and says, "You stole my land!" So what does Yossi say? Let's go to the next slide. It's a little long. I'll read it to you. What are you talking about? I'm a nice guy. I'm a doctor. I cured cancer. I volunteered to save lives in Haiti. My brother invented the internet. My neighbor is anti-Semitic. So let's assume that he's in front of a judge right now. Or he's with the police. Or he's with a journalist who's writing a story. And besides, you know, the neighbor on the other side beats his wife and kids, so why isn't he criticizing him instead of me? I need all this land as a security buffer between the wife beater and me. My relatives have lived here for a long time. And, you know, listen, I only threw rocks at him after he threw rocks at my kids, but I warned him to get the kids out of the way so I wouldn't hurt him. But, listen, I really want peace. So what if I gave half my land to the neighbor if he agrees to try to stop trying to hurt my family, if he would stop hurting my family? Would that be all right? I want you to think about that. It's an amalgamation of many of the arguments. Some of them are valid arguments. Some of them are true arguments. You know, and Jewish medical breakthroughs and technological breakthroughs. All of these statements pretty much are true. Yes, it's self-defense. But is that the response of a falsely accused person who has been accused of stealing somebody's land. And he's in front of a judge, and those are his arguments. Now I want you to think, you're in front of the court of world opinion, and those are the only arguments I'm hearing right now. What if Yossi, next slide, wouldn't it be better if Yossi said, here's a copy of my land title deed, would you please arrest my neighbor for assault and tell me how to get a protective order to keep him from harassing my family, and once the violence and intimidation stops, we can hopefully build a working relationship. Are those not the words and the position of a falsely accused person?
Yes. Yeah.
My land title deed. My land title deed. Right here. Okay. Now, your narrative, and I say your, I mean we, the Israel advocacy that I see, as an outsider, remember, to those of you, I'm not Jewish, okay, I'm a Christian guy. As an outsider, I look at that and I say, your narrative is actually degrading Jewish honor and dignity, because instead of standing up as a falsely accused person, you're dancing around with all these different arguments instead of speaking the truth. And I don't know why you would do that. Because I'm telling you, if my neighbor comes to me and says, you stole my land, we're going to court, I'm holding up my land title deed, and the case is over before it gets to court. It's done. Okay? Now, I want you to think about the dangers to Jewish honor and dignity of the new, I'm using that word deliberately, the new two-state solution. If you sign a deal right now, and say it magically happened tomorrow, peace in the Middle East, and finally the Islamists agree to give up their genocidal quest to exterminate Jews and destroy Israel, let's say it happens, good, and they say let's sign a two-state solution now. What you have just done, instead of because you didn't hold up your land title deed, that we'll talk about in a minute, you've just admitted that every vile accusation against your people as ethnic cleansing, land-stealing monsters is true, because you didn't want to hold up your land title deed and say, no, you're not telling the truth. This is the national home of the Jewish people. Here's the proof. We'll get to that. And I think that is a really sad, it's a really sad legacy to leave your kids, and I think it's a betrayal of every person who suffered and died to establish the state of Israel. That's my opinion. My opinion. But there's another issue. It's not just degrading your honor and your dignity. It's actually putting your country and probably your people in grave danger. Because I want you to think about this for a second. What happens, let's say you sign a new two-state solution, and you'll understand why I use that phrase in a few minutes. Let's say you sign this deal today. What happens 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 or 100 years from now when the Islamists say, well, thank you very much, now we want the rest? Because let me tell you, as a speaker, so true, as a speaker at a conference in New York said that I thought was brilliant, if Jews don't have the right to be in Judea and Samaria, they don't have the right to Tel Aviv either. They all flow from the same rights. So what are you going to say when they want? Oh, they won't do that. Pardon? We're going to learn about your land title deed from 1922. Okay, what are we in? 2014. Not even 100 years later. And already people don't want to talk about it. So it'll happen. And you know it's going to happen. If you go and sign this, if you sign a deal without the world acknowledging that your owners, not occupiers. Anyways, now, next slide, please. Now, this is Zoe. I don't know if Ezra, is Ezra Levant here yet? Oh, good, okay. I plagiarized Zoe from one of his presentations at the JCC in London, because he used, and I thought it was just brilliant, he used little Zoe, wide-eyed Zoe, as an example for his ethical oil presentation. It was great. So, anyways, Zoe is a first-year political science student, and maybe she's in week 2, and by week 2, they're already trying to convince her that Jews are ethnic cleansing, land-stealing, occupying monsters. Okay? She is never, ever, she's going to be president one day, by the way. You don't know. I think I've decided she's going to be president. Now her sister, her twin sister, is also going to be prime minister one day. Actually, I think she has a twin brother named Justin. I'm not sure. Anyway, she's going to be president one day. Jews are never going to be seen as okay as long as she thinks you're land-stealing monsters. So you have to address the occupation narrative. Because if you don't, she's going to. There's a great speaker, a great writer, Simca, I think his name is, in the Israel Times, and he wrote about, listen, you think Obama can be iffy on Israel? Wait till Zoe gets there. Wait till she gets there. She's not going to just be a little iffy. She's going to arm the people trying to destroy you. That's what's coming. That's what his argument is. I agree with him. I don't know when it's going to happen. But anyways, we've got to deal with the occupation narrative. Next question. Next slide, please. So here's some key questions. Are you owners or occupiers? If you're occupiers, then I can go home and I can get on with spending time with my wife and doing a bunch of other more interesting things, because I don't defend occupiers. Not interested. Do you have a land title deed for Israel?
Yes.
Right there. We're going to look at it. Now, what do you do with that land title deed from a marketing perspective? How do you interact with people? What do we want to do with it? Okay, so let's look at the booklet. Let's have a look. Now, how many of you have had training with me using this booklet before? Put up your hands. Okay, everybody but them. Okay. How many of you have heard of the Balfour Declaration? Put up your hand. Beautiful. Almost universal. How many of you have heard of the San Remo Conference? How many of you have heard of the Mandate for Palestine? How many of you, honestly, have read the Mandate for Palestine? Handful. This is typical. I did this presentation for 77 members at a Christian conference by Return Ministries. By the way, they help Jews make Aliyah. Great people from Israel, U.S., Canada, and Great Britain. Same numbers. I mean, 77 people, 3 people had read the mandate. This is your country's land title deed. So let's have a look-see at it. Now, this document is divided into some parts. The first part are the images of your land title deed. These are actual images of the document. We're not going to write on those, because I think they're pretty special. In fact, there's one of the people who attended my training wrote to me afterwards and said, "Mark, I'm so moved. I've never had a copy of my country's land title deed, and it was a Christian, a non-Jew, that put one in my hands." And she was so moved by that. And the power of this thing, this document is amazing. So the first part are the actual pages, and there are not many of them. Now, beginning on page 12, which is where we're going to be doing some working, it's a text reprint. And I bolded some sections, and you can make notes in there all you want. Later on in the book, there's a summary on page 24. We'll get to that. And on 25, there's a map. And then the thing we're going to do tonight is on page 28, and that's some role play, some narrative making, taking charge of the narrative. So let's go to page 12. And it's the first page. It's the cover page, League of Nations Mandate for Palestine. And you'll see it's together with a note by the Secretary General relating to its application to the territory known as Transjordan. So not only is this your land title deed, it also talks about, in effect, the original two-state solution, and as opposed to the new two-state solutions. So let's turn the page over to number 13. Mandate for Palestine. First, the Council of the League of Nations. So, this document came about as a result, as most of you know, the Allies won World War I. They defeated the Ottoman Turks. They defeated the Germans, and they had the right under international law to divide up the land. So what they did is they came up with this system called mandates. They didn't want to colonize it. They didn't want to colonize all these countries. What they wanted to do was to enable them to progress to the point where they didn't need any help. So they divided up all of the Middle East, There are other countries as well, as we'll see. There's 14 countries were actually created from a mandate system. Oh, geez, we've got to move. I've got to make up some time here. Awesome. We can do it. So this process is not unique to Israel. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, they were created by mandates. Other countries like Benin, Togo, many countries, and they're all listed on the summary. So let's have a look at some of the key provisions of this. Paragraph 2. Whereas the principal Allied powers have agreed that the mandatory, which is Great Britain, should be responsible for putting into effect the declaration originally made on November 2nd, 1917 by the government of His Britannic Majesty. What document are they talking about? Balfour Declaration. Exactly. So it's right in here. And adopted by said powers in favor of the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Let's go to the next paragraph. Whereas recognition has thereby been given to the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine and to the grounds for reconstituting their national home in that country. Understand the power of this statement? I don't have to argue. I don't have to be an archaeological or historical expert. All I have to do is be able to read that sentence and say the world, as we'll see, recognized the ancient Jewish claims and ties to Palestine. And further, intends that the national home of the Jewish people be created there. That's one powerful paragraph. Let's go down to the next bolded section. Whereas His Britannic Majesty has accepted the mandate in respect of Palestine and undertaken to exercise it on behalf of the League of Nations. This is not a British mandate. This is not a British colonial document. This is a document that was approved by all 52 members of the League of Nations at that time. So it's Britain accepting the world's mandate to look out for the Jewish people and establish a national home. That was their obligation in there. Let's go to page 14. Robert, I think I might go a little bit over. I'm sorry. Article 2. The mandatory shall be responsible for placing the country under such political, administrative, and economic conditions as will secure the establishment of the Jewish national home. And by the way, we're also going to respect the rights, the civil rights and religious rights of other people. Kind of like Canada, okay? When somebody says, well, Palestinians deserve a state of their own. Why? Listen, there's a lot of Chinese people who have lived in North Toronto or downtown Toronto for a long time. Do they deserve their own state? They already have a state. It's called Canada. The world decided that this was going to be a Jewish state which was required to respect the civil rights of minorities. Okay. Article 4. An appropriate Jewish agency shall be recognized for the purpose of advising and cooperating in other matters which may affect the establishment of the Jewish national home and the interests of the Jewish population. Now look at Article 5. The mandatory shall be responsible for seeing that no Palestine territory shall be ceded or leased to or in any way placed under the control of the government of the foreign power. Ooh. So that means this 1937 Peel paper that wanted to divide it up. That's illegal. The 1947 UN resolution that I used to think created it, that was illegal. Absolutely. I'll let the lawyers argue about that one. But that's pretty clear to me. Article 6. This is a good one. The administration of Palestine, while ensuring the rights and positions of other sections of the population are not prejudiced, shall facilitate Jewish immigration under suitable conditions and shall encourage close settlement by Jews on the land. Okay, so Jews didn't wake up one morning and start stealing land from people. They had the right to do it under this document. Article 7, talking about Palestinian citizenship being granted to Jews who take up permanent residence. Now, let's flip over to page 16, Article 15. This is the same article kind of that we almost have in our charter. No discrimination of any kind should be made between the inhabitants of Palestine on the grounds of race, religion, or language. Okay? Now, let's flip forward to Article 25. This is an important one. Page 19, Article 25. In the territories lying between the Jordan and the eastern boundary of Palestine as ultimately determined, the mandatory shall be entitled, with consent of the council, to postpone or withhold application of this mandate. Now, so, what we glean from that clause alone is that the Jews were supposed to have land east of the Jordan River. Yes. Their scholars will argue whether was it all of what is Jordan today? Was it part of? Who cares? Don't care. I'm not making an argument that Israel's going to take over Jordan. What I am saying is that the Jews were supposed to get land east of the Jordan River. But the mandatory was allowed to say, nah, we're going to put a kibosh on that one. Okay? So let's look at the map on page 25. Page 25. Oh, you're killing me. Okay, I'll try it. We're almost there, Robert. Trust me. Okay, map on page 25. This is the map that the Zionist organization gave to the San Remo Council and basically corresponds with the tribes of Israel. That's the part they claimed, and it's the part east of the Jordan River that the mandate's talking about. Okay, so let's go back to, now let's move on to page 21. And this is about Article 25. This is a note by the Secretary General. It's a memorandum by the British representative. Okay, page 21, right in the bottom, article number 2. In pursuant of the provisions of the article, his government invites the Council to pass the resolution. The following provisions of the mandate for Palestine are not applicable to the territory known as Transjordan, which comprise all the territory lying to the east of a line drawn from a point. They go through the whole thing. In essence, what this is that the British are exercising their right in the mandate to withhold Jewish settlement from east of the Jordan River. Okay? That's the original two-state solution right there. Okay? Why are we talking about new two-state solutions? Let's honor the first one. Because if they don't want to honor the first one, what makes you think, we don't have time for questions? We'll do that tonight? Sorry, Robert's really good. Okay? So why are we doing that? Okay? So, if you skip on later, you can read a summary down on page 24. There's a quick summary here. And some of the things you'll note is that the U.S. government passed resolutions and reached a treaty based on the mandate. It's enshrined in U.S. law, the Lodge Fish Resolution. And the UN Charter, Clause 80, protects all of the rights from the mandate. Okay? Now, so, those are the rights. Tonight, we're going to get into the rest about how do you use that information. But I'm going to leave you with one thing. And then, next slide. Next slide. Okay. I want you to think about this possibility. What if, during the Gaza war, Israel's prime minister and their leaders had said something like this? There can be no peace without truth. And the truth is the Jewish people are owners, not occupiers, because we have a land title deed from the original two-state solution, the 1922 League of Nations mandate for Palestine, in which the world recognized our ancient historical ties to Palestine and specifically authorized us to rebuild our national home there. Next slide. Jewish honor and dignity and security requires us to put truth before solutions. And so we are putting a moratorium on all peace negotiations and land giveaways until the world acknowledges and reaffirms the promises made to us in the mandate. In the meantime, we will defend ourselves against those who seek a second Holocaust against the Jewish people.